Certainly, I give honor to the Spirit of God and to the Inland Empire concerned African churches. I regard it as a privilege and an honor for you to ask me to be a part of your Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday celebration. And of course, to operate with the theme that you have chosen, Dream Reality, I Rise. I want to say I thank God for Bishop Kevin Simmons and, of course, Pastor Lakita Simmons for the work that you all are doing in the Inland Empire, along with all of the other churches. And we just thank God for the ministry that God has given you there. I want to begin maybe in a very unorthodox way. And I say that because this might not be the kind of message for a holiday celebration. And I really don't want to be contrary to what you're trying to do, but there are certain questions that we have to ask ourselves. We must ask ourselves, is Dr. King's dream still in the nightmare stage? How would Dr. King evaluate the relationship between segregation and desegregation, considering the contemporary black plight that we are experiencing? Does the atmosphere Dr. King had spawned the journey from nightmare to wonderful dream still exists? Or has the power of preachers of this world and preachers of the word weltered because of our love of money and personal aggrandizement? Should we expect white supremacy to ever go away? And is the dream's fulfillment contingent on the removal of this diabolical systemic behavior? I will declare, without using my prophetic mantle, and I'm going to start at the end, that white supremacy is not going away until the millennium. Just think with me. And remember that just before World War I, England, with 5% of 8.1 million inhabitants, controlled the destiny of 25% of 1.75 billion people. Yes, just before World War I, there was 1.75 billion people in the world, and 25% of the earth and the world was controlled by 5% of the population of England at the time, and it was 8.1 million. What does this amount to? Do the math. This amounts to one white person, each enjoying the natural resources from their countries and the labor of 1,080 souls. One person having extrapolated the resources from the country and still have the labor of 1,080 people totally at their disposal. Give consideration that most other European nations had their share of the rest of the world. All this happening towards the end of 400 plus years of colonialization. How can we forget the Berlin Conference, held between November 15, 1884 and February 26, 1885, and that conference resulted in the division of Africa among European colonial powers with complete disregard of the established indigenous African boundaries. Now, let's not stop there. This white supremacy crossed the Atlantic to America, where the wealthiest 10% of Americans own a record 89% of all the U.S. Now, just remove, just go with me for a minute here, and just remove the periods from U period, S period, and it would simply state that 10% of the Americans, the wealthiest Americans, own 89% of all of us. Consider the disparity of wealth distribution that has left us living in urban America like our brothers and sisters in post-colonized nations, stripped of resources, without managerial skills and administrative prowess, so little to distribute among so many. Check the math. 10% of Americans control 90%. We might as well take that 89%, make it 90% of the country. So now you end up giving 90% of the people 10% of the money. The dollar circulates 14 times in the Jewish community before it leaves. The dollar circulates about 7 times in the Asian community before it leaves. But the dollar does not circulate in our community at all. It just leaves. So now we are left disenfranchised and violently confused as the nations previously occupied by imperialistic nations. I'm beginning to believe that the inner city, where most of us dwell, is the leftovers of being colonized within our own country. Now, the attitude then of the posterity of the indentured laborers, who populate America, they were fleeing from the feudal system to this new world. And their attitude has morphed into the autocratic disposition of the European courts that oppressed their beleaguered ancestors. They are now becoming just like the people they ran from to come over here to put the document together that we call the Constitution. So now, what can I say? True to white supremacy form, there has surfaced a group of self-aggrandizing, narcissistic racists in the name of being conservative, and they are bent on disposing of the Constitution, which is the substratum of Dr. King's dream. Without the Constitution, he couldn't have this dream. Let me just, I told you to be unorthodox. The Bible teaches, therefore, as sin entered the world through one man, so by one man, Jesus, came grace and deliverance. I take this parallel and say, so by one man, Dr. King, in coalition with like-minded civil rights activists, forced President Lyndon Johnson, moved him literally to uphold the Constitution by signing the Civil Rights Act. However, to our chagrin, 58 and a half years later, one man, Donald Trump, and a coalition of egomaniacal, bigoted white supremacists seek vehemently to overthrow our democracy and desecrate the Constitution. And by doing that, they will reduce Dr. King's dream to a fantastic illusion. No one stole their election, but they trying to steal Dr. King's dream by one man and his cohorts. America has been swept off the road to fulfilling a social justice dream down a precipice of chaotic ignorance. Dr. King had a coalition of denominational Christian leaders along with other world religious leaders, social activists from all social platforms. There were a choir. Yeah, that's what these were. A choir of self-sacrificial, nonviolent voices that were willing to suffer in order to be heard. The atmosphere has changed under this present day onslaught to strip us of the hope stimulated by Dr. King's dream. The players have changed. Where are the clergy that stood together in the late 50s and 60s willing to sacrifice for the furtherance of the people? I'm so sad to say that unlike Moses, we have become enamored with being called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing, as the book of Hebrews says, 11 about verse 25, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, and talking about Moses, for he had a respect unto the recompense of the reward. So by faith he forsook that comfort zone called Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Unlike Moses and Dr. King, we have become so saturated with the trappings of our apparent success that we've gone AWOL in the thick of the criminal justice reform battle, the police brutality battle, the gun violence battle, the equal work, equal pay battle, the better education battle, the equal health care battle, the equal opportunity battle. We've gone AWOL. We have become so soft with our health, wealth, and prosperity message that we have shifted our passion from the welfare of our people and shifted our passion ebulliently to our insatiable desire for things. Now we even judge the success of our ministries not by how many of our people we have ameliorated, but how wonderfully well we have changed our lifestyles. So what happens, unlike Martin Luther King, we are still stuck in Egypt, criticizing, mentalizing, ostracizing, and even demonizing the people who use to expostulate that Black Lives Matter. God used them to expostulate that Black Lives Matter while we bask in our recent acquired wealth and status. So easily becoming minions and sycophants to governmental personalities, like many of our evangelical white supremacists. How did we lose the voice we inherited from the dreamer? We have closed our eyes to the condition of our people. We have covered our ears to the cry of our people and shut our mouth to protect our newfound status. There are times when to stay silent is to be complicit to the things that destroy our theocratic vocational responsibility. How did we get to this place of such a great divide, even among ourselves in America, when we, the carriers of the gospel, have been assigned to bring the world together in Jesus Christ? How did we reduce the significance of our theocratic calling to literally become minions and sycophants to political parties, Democrat or Republican? How could we substitute our ephemeral financial bottom line for the eternal reward that we were called to receive by being like Dr. King, working for the benefit of the people? How could we, who were called to lead men to the ultimate leader of all men, spend our time reducing his message to lead men to our self-centered political leaders? How could we take the purity of his kingdom teaching and subjugate its integrity and authenticity to any corrupt world system? We have no coalition with the evangelicals in general. They are exhibiting extreme right-wing lives in the name of being conservative, and they're seeking to join governmental forces to make laws of their idiosyncratic religious beliefs, to persecute and ultimately prosecute all who do not share their political views, living a life at the exclusivity of all others who need justice and opportunity, ignoring divine edict to go into all the world. They simply sell out to the political party of their choice. And in such a way that they're taking us back to the feudal system, taking us back to imperialism, taking us back literally to a fascist kind of a government. Dr. King was not a lackey or foreigner to any political party or government. Dr. King was a theocrat with a dream. A theocrat does not speak up to power. I need to talk about that for a little bit. You see, a theocrat speaks down to power. And if you want to understand that, take a look at John the Baptist versus Herod. We think that he spoke up to Herod simply because Herod was king and he had the power, and ultimately he took John's head off. So we think he was speaking up. Nathan wasn't speaking up to David. Nathan was David's conscience. John the Baptist was Herod's conscience. He wasn't speaking up to Herod, because no theocrat speaks up to any human governmental figure, even though from an earthly point of view, that figure may have the power over the theocratic voice. But here's what Jesus said. Jesus said, no man born of a woman was greater than John the Baptist. And I know that included Herod. Yes, Herod was born of a woman. Jesus said, no man born of a woman was greater than John the Baptist. But then he turned around and said, but he that is least in the kingdom is greater than John, and no man born of a woman is greater than John, and yet he that is least in the kingdom is greater than John, which means that we don't speak up to anybody. Because if we are theocratic and hold true to our theocratic calling and our anointing, as Dr. King did. You see, Dr. King, as a theocrat with a dream, served only God by serving the people. He transcended all party affiliation, Democratic, Republican, or Independent. So, Dr. King's theocracy supersedes democracy, supersedes monarchy, supersedes oligarchy. Yes, Dr. King's theocracy and his theology superseded socialism, communism, meritocracy, autocracy. He did not take side with the well and isolate the brokenhearted. When we assent to both, he did not take side with the free and isolate those in bondage. When we assent to both, he did not take side with those who have vision and isolate the visionless, who happen to be hopeless, who happen to be oppressed and downtrodden. He didn't take sides when we assent to both. He did not take side with the oppressors and isolate the oppressed. When we assent to both, the thought of self must have given way to the grandiose mission that he was called of God to perform. Dr. King gave his life for the mission he was called to execute. Why? Because the Spirit of the Lord was upon Dr. King. And I say as I close, when we embrace our anointing without fear, we can turn his dream into our vision. And then we can declare dream reality. Dr. Martin Luther King is not here to continue it, but his legacy lives on in us. So now I'm saying To you wonderful people under the sound of my voice, I wish I was there with you, but I'm not. But arise. You are needed, and you have been placed here. We have been placed here for such a time as this. God bless you, and thank you for including me.